was fully convinced that we were God's chosen people. Our father was the leader of a Mormon religious cult.
Our dad had 13 wives.
He was more revered than Jesus.
So we can clearly see how this is going to run into a conflict where he's starting to try and claim these revelations, claiming that God's speaking to him, but then he's got his older brother that's the actual prophet. And I've already know that this is going to lead to him eventually feeling the need to take that place, and he does. Also, maybe put this at the beginning of the video. I almost forgot to mention this, but there's going to be a lot of spoiler alerts. So I would recommend, if you have the time, you should watch the episodes and then watch these YouTube videos, because this is going to be recapping the majority of stuff that happens in the video and diving deeper into it and comparing it to other polygamous cults. But it's going to have lots of spoilers. It's going to kind of ruin it for you. So if you watch this first, I don't know, don't just know there's spoilers, okay?
Anime left Nephi without a word of warning. This was the first time that Ervil took another man's wife as his own.
Whoa, oh my goodness. Just talking about each kind of phase of Ervil LeBaron's life and the cultivation of the group that he's starting, the cult. It's so clear the type of power hungry, seeing it from an outside perspective after the fact, after it's all happened and looking at it like as history, you know, it's so much easier to see how the power is getting to him and how he just keeps getting more and more extreme. And now we just get into the part where they're talking about how he's already been taking advantage of everyone financially, and then he starts wanting to make revelations, and now he even goes so far as taking another man's wife. He literally has one of the girls that he starts meeting with and converting and preaching to, he has her leave her husband and come and marry him.
But it was not the last.
My mom had 12 children.
And this happened multiple times. Multiple of his wives had previously been married to other people. He told them to leave them and come marry him. And they did it too.
So much tension going on, and this rift between Joel and Ervil is getting so wide that finally Joel, he decides he's just going to go elsewhere.
Ervil is having all this power go to his head. He's essentially doing everything that he wants. And Joel, up to this point, is allowing it, is what it sounds like. Sounds like he was very hesitant about it, and he kind of tried to talk to Ervil and tell him to like calm down and stop being so crazy. But eventually, I mean, Ervil just completely ignores his brother and just keeps doing what he's doing. And eventually Joel can't take it anymore and says Ervil's just going too extreme, taking everything too far. And so Joel tries to excommunicate Ervil. But of course, Ervil's not having that. So instead,
Blood atonement is the taking of someone's life so that their blood can hit the ground and cry to God for atonement.
There's that blood atonement. A lot of the groups talk about this blood atonement because in the scriptures, there's this thing that they talk about that's blood atonement, and it has its own little definition, but every group kind of like interprets it a little bit different, but they all associate it to essentially someone dying or being able to kill someone. And in this group, they are saying that they use that excuse of the blood atonement for why that they can, but also that they should kill people if they don't live the principles of the group. If they are born and raised in the group or taught it to a full knowledge and they truly understand and know what the gospel is, and they willingly disobey it or go against it or aren't obedient, then they're saying the blood atonement allows them to essentially kill that person. Which their interpretation of that blood atonement is extra interesting when you've seen my recap on Escaping Polygamy that shows some of the definitions from other polygamous groups, like the AUB group was the most recent one, where they talk about that blood atonement and the way that they interpret it, and they will implement it into their polygamous cult. But so far, out of all the videos that I've done, everything we've like reviewed and gone into of these polygamous groups, the LeBaron group is the only one that like done a review on that has actually taken that to murdering somebody and killed somebody using the excuse of the blood atonement. Of course, that's just an excuse. I mean, it's very clear he killed his brother for the power and the leadership, but he justifies it and convinces all of his followers that it was an okay thing by using that scripture of the blood atonement. Ervil also was going to the extreme in the extent that he was, in order to convince people to come and join his cult and to kind of choose his side over Joel's, is he would promise his daughters to people. And he actually went through with it too. He promised his 15-year-old daughter a 40-year-old man. And she not only had to marry this 40-year-old man, but she and one of her half-sisters got married to him at the exact same time. They literally had their wedding together. So he was doing all of these arranged marriages, which we see in a lot of the polygamous groups as well. Pretty much every single one of the polygamous groups, actually. The woman, and this is why reference to the girls in these cults as currency, because of the way that they are married to people. From an outside perspective, it looks so much more like a transaction. It's very clear to see that, how it's supposed to be revelation from God, and you get this direction, and there's a spiritual aspect to it, and that's what true love is and all this stuff. You can kind of be blindsided by it. But from an outside perspective, looking in, it's super clear and obvious exactly what it is. And it's not hard to tell that they're being used for some bigger plot in this game, basically.
So Ervil tells his followers, listen, they're not following me. And if they're not following me, they're being wicked. And what do we do to the wicked? Scriptures say we kill them. And that's what we're going to do.
Isn't it so funny how they use the scriptures to convince people to do what they want them to do, but they totally ignore all the scriptures about being kind and doing good to people and being fair and turning the other cheek. But no, they literally rummage through all the scriptures and find one that supports them wanting to murder somebody. And they say, look, it says if they're not following me, they should be killed. They're as good as dead or something. And so they use that to convince the people that they can murder people, and it's okay. I swear, you can basically find the support of whatever belief you want in the scriptures. There's so much, and people just go along with it.
Dan and his henchmen, they took a chair leg and beat Joel senseless. And then Dan puts a gun in his mouth and pulled the trigger.
So Ervil is just going off of his rocker, going crazy, doing whatever he wants, taking full control. And Joel has enough, excommunicates him, tells him to leave, and wants nothing to do with him anymore. But instead of Ervil just listening to his so-called prophet, he decides to have somebody take care of Joel for him. So then when he claims to be the prophet, no one else can discredit him. So he has one of his right-hand men, a person called Dan that was really dedicated to him. He has him and one of his buddies go and meet Joel in a secluded place. They beat Joel, chair it sounds like, and then end up shooting him in the head. We wonder why they bothered to beat him first. I wonder if they tried to get him to submit or wanted him to say that Ervil was the true prophet or something, or maybe we're trying to convince him to tell the followers that he's a false prophet. I don't know. But for some reason, they took it upon themselves to beat him up first and then ended up shooting him. But now Joel's out of the picture, and we're going to see how crazy Ervil gets now that he has full control. And he doesn't quite yet, though, because now he has to do a little bit of convincing to let all the people know that, oh, he's the next prophet, right? Which is a little bit extra difficult for him in this particular moment because Joel just announced that Ervil should be excommunicated or is excommunicated, and he should go off into his own section. Then Joel just happens to die. I'm sure everyone knows it was a murder, he was killed, but now Ervil is trying to claim that it's God's will, and Ervil needs to be the prophet now.
And this is the ultimate betrayal. Joel has been assassinated by the people he once trusted the most.
And how sad is that? Ervil wasn't the one that pulled the trigger, but he was the one that planned it and set it up and basically ordered the death of his own brother, you guys. This is how crazy they get. This fight for power and wanting this control and this money and this status, they will go to extreme lengths to get it and to keep it. It's so crazy. Just to think it's all crazy. They all must be a little bit messed up in the head or something. But for Joel to think, I'm sure it never crossed his mind that his own brother would go to such extreme lengths to take him out. And when it sounds like Joel was trying to be pretty nice to his brother, let him have a lot of say and a lot of control until he just abused it and took it too far, then he tried to cut him off. But, I mean, there's just no trust within these groups, so much greed and power.
Someone that we loved, that we, revered. From that moment on, it was like, if he's capable of murdering his own brother, he'll kill anyone and all of us.
Oh, that's a good point. One of the daughters mentioned that once the people find out about Joel's murder, and it sounds like it's very clear and obvious that they know Ervil was behind the murder of Joel, because he's the one that benefits and profits from all of that, that they all start getting scared. They almost don't even dare to question Ervil's claim as the new prophet, because, like she says, if he's willing to kill his own brother for this power and control over the group, then he would be willing to kill any one of them.
So you didn't know that people were being blood atoned?
No, I had no idea people were being blood atoned.
You were married to Dan, but you didn't know
I didn't know. He never talked to me about murdering anybody. I never knew any of this stuff was taking place.
Wow, okay. That's a little bit interesting. So one of Ervil's daughters, Faye, who was married to Dan at the time, and Dan's the person that actually carried out murdering Joel. She had no idea that her own husband was going out and committed this murder or plotting anything like that. So they kept everything a secret, at least from her, from a lot of the family members, which is crazy. Can you imagine being married to someone? Well, I guess it's very different because you married 1/5 probably married to the person, because I'm sure he had other wives. Yeah, they definitely had a lot of secrets to keep, that's for sure.
The whole time our father was carrying out blood atonements, Dan was right there beside him.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure he knew about him.
Knew about
He was
him.
his right-hand man. He would have had to know about
He
him.
would have
Right.
had to know everything.
That's a little interesting too, because she didn't believe that her husband was a part of them, but it sounds like she did at the time and does now know that her father was behind the murder. So, interesting.
I generally was a very obedient wife, and Dan yelled and screamed at everybody when they weren't doing what they were supposed to. That's how cults work. They work by fear and control.
So all of the daughters agree that they feel that their cult in particular, and they also believe a lot of the other polygamous cults, run by fear and making sure that everyone's like obedient, because if they don't, they know that they'll be punished, and they're okay with using, brute force, beating people into submission, just whatever means necessary to keep everyone obedient and in line. I do wonder, though, I want to try and save most of my side tangents for at the end. I'm going to go off on a little rant in comparisons and the differences. But so far, from what I can tell and what I have heard about this group in particular, it does sound like I would rate it as the more violent one of the other polygamous groups. But of course, there's a lot to dive into that. But from what it sounds like, from what they are saying, it does sound like there's things that are much more violent in this group. And each group has their own things that I feel like have bigger issues that are different in different ways from each group. But this one definitely sounds like it's got some extreme levels of that violence and willingness to even, commit murders. So go out and murder people.
He just went right along with it.
Now, keep in mind, I'm not trying to be offensive or rude or anything. They're young kids when this is happening, so they necessarily be judged for it. But it's really strange hearing them say that they were these young teenagers in this family, in this cult-ran family, where their father and other members were plotting these murders and these ways to beat people into submission, and just all this crazy control and violence happening around them. And they're straight up saying that they just went right along with it. Like that was normal to them. That's so wild.
We heard that one of Joel's followers saw Dan Jordan with Joel shortly before he was killed.
They didn't even know how weird it was, you guys. Oh, that's so crazy. That's so crazy, but I know exactly what they mean. because you just don't know what you don't know. And when you're that young and you're exposed to all that at such a young age, and that's all that you know, that's exactly how you interpret it. That's what it is. That's what happens to these people raised in these cults.
Baja police start asking questions, investigating, searching for Ervil. This fear and this terror of this crazy Mormon prophet is compounded by the fact that they don't know where Ervil is. They can't find him.
Ervil was sort of like Pablo Escobar. I'm going to move a lot. I move to different places. I'm not going to let people know. I'm just going to show up and keep moving and moving and moving. And I think that's one of the reasons he had a couple places in Mexico and several places in the States that he could go to. I believe Ervil was both paranoid and smart. It's smart to keep moving around. If they can't fix you, they can't find you.
Which is more support to my thought of that the LeBaron group is the most violent, probably the craziest of all of the polygamous groups, from what I can tell so far.
We lived in homes in California, in Houston, in Mexico, Dallas, in
Denver.
Oklahoma, in Denver.
We never got to feel settled anywhere.
The heat of all this tension from the murder, Ervil takes his family, and of all the places, they go from Mexico to Denver, Colorado. And that's where they moved to go into hiding, which to me is a little strange because, I mean, I guess he's trying to get away from the murder, not get caught for that. But now he's in the U.S. where polygamy is illegal. So the kids are talking about how they are starting to get taught and kind of trained to never mention anything about the plural lifestyle that they're living, that they even being like trained on if they are asked by police officers, because they're running away from, I think it was the FBI or some police authorities. So they are teaching their kids how to like stay into hiding and not get caught, not get in trouble or noticed by really anyone in essence. And they go to extreme lengths. They talk about how the kids, they weren't even allowed to play outside because of nosy neighbors. They didn't want anyone finding out what was going on. And there were multiple wives, multiple families, many kids all living in one house. So they had to do a lot to keep it a secret, which I can't imagine how they could possibly keep that a secret. Can you imagine if you were neighbors to someone that was keeping 3 families hidden in one house? I'm pretty sure you would figure it out eventually. But that's what they essentially did. And they didn't stay in one house for super long though. They did have to move many times, and they even talk about some of the homes having secret rooms and hidden things behind bookshelves and crawl spaces and all sorts of stuff to be able to keep things hidden and secret. So, which is all really crazy. But again, imagine what the kids had to go through, how hard that would be for them. Not only talking about child neglect, but a child's upbringing in the world that we live in today that's already confusing, already takes a lot of work to be able to understand it and become a beneficial contributor to society. If you have little to no interactions with just the world in general, with people and society, and all you know is what's within your little home and your 3 families and all your siblings, like how difficult is that going to make that child's life to try and grow up and live, to their fullest potential in this world? Like, you're just shooting them in the foot, man. I feel like that's going to make it so difficult for them.
Ervil sat in jail for about a year, awaiting trial.
When Ervil was in jail for murdering his brother Joel, my Uncle Joel, my mother would take Ervil food.
Okay, so I guess eventually Ervil gets sick of all this hiding and moving and running from the authorities, that eventually he just goes to the police station and essentially turns himself in, but continues to claim that he had nothing to do with the murder of his brother Joel. And he ends up having to stay in jail or prison or wherever while the trial goes on, and he fights the courts or whatever to try and claim his innocence. While he's in jail, because it says it was close to a year that he ends up having to wait and go through this whole process. While he's in jail, members and followers still bring him things and still report back to him in prison. And even his own wives come and visit the prison, and he still is having children during this time period where he's in jail. So some of his kids were actually conceived in the prison cell. So nothing's going to stop him from having those babies. It's just, it's so crazy. And the craziest part about it all is he eventually gets let go. Like, they, I guess, don't have enough evidence to pin the murder on him. So they have to let him go. And he becomes a free man.
Ervil is put on trial, found guilty of being the intellectual author of the murder. He's sentenced to 12 years in prison in Mexico. And then the next day, he's released by a higher court on a technicality, supposed technicality.
Oh, okay. So I guess I was wrong. I misinterpreted that. And it looks like there was more to that. It wasn't just that they didn't have enough evidence, because he was sentenced to 12 years in prison for the murder, and he lost the case and was proven guilty. But once he gets sent to jail, somehow, and it's claimed, they don't know exactly how, but something happens, and a lot of people claim it was a bribery. But one of the higher court authorities overrules that judge's ruling of sending him to jail and lets him free, drops the charges, and he doesn't have to go to jail anymore. And this was taking place in Mexico, and so it's not super clear on exactly what happened, but he does get let out of prison, and he only, I think it says his total time served in the prison was around a year. But again, it's super fuzzy about what exactly happens, but eventually he gets let go, and he is a free man. So
certainly in Ervil's mind, probably in the minds of his followers, the fact that he was able to beat this charge and walk away, it was just further proof that he was the one mighty and strong prophet, because not many people can get away with murder.
Of course, Ervil takes this bribery or whatever he did to get out of his 12-year sentence, and he starts teaching his followers that God's on his side. And that's a sign that he's a true prophet. He can manipulate the whole government and the system and all that, you know?
Ervil is just getting warmed up. He is developing more power, more money, more women, more guns, more followers.
Now, I think Ervil's own words and teachings, or whatever he's saying, his prophecies he's saying to his people, are getting to his own head. And now he's getting overly cocky and wants even more control and more power. That he is telling other polygamous prophets and leaders that they are wrong, that they aren't a true prophet of God, but that he, Ervil LeBaron, is God's true prophet. And the only one, because there can only be one, of course. So he starts threatening the prophet of the AUB group. And at this time, it was the FLDS group. Oh, see, this is why I wish they would have mentioned which polygamous group he was from, because let me just get the name, because that's why I went over all the names at the beginning of this and I have them written down, so we can figure out which polygamous group it was that he's now targeting, the next prophet he wants to target and take down, and essentially somehow try and take their followers for himself. Or, I mean, he doesn't say that. Like, all they say is that he feels these other polygamous prophets are a threat to him and his following, I guess stopping them from growing or from them following the true prophet or something. I don't know. But he starts plotting taking out the next prophet. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Now kind of makes sense why they didn't associate the group necessarily, because this is why it gets so confusing, you guys. Like, literally, turns out Ervil has another brother. That's not Joel, his older brother, but another brother named Verlin. So there's Ervil and Verlin. And Verlin was married to Irene. So it was Verlin LeBaron and Irene LeBaron. But they had a child named Donna Goldberg. So the names get really complicated, and it is kind of hard to pinpoint who's with who, because they're trying to keep it all secret. They give their children different names than the parents, and it just confuses everything up. But I think, from what I understand, it wasn't another polygamous group like the AUB or the FLDS. One of the separations from the LeBaron group, or the Church of the Firstborn. The person who he's plotting, the next prophet he's plotting to take out, essentially, is Verlin LeBaron. And so if I understand this correctly, Verlin LeBaron was another one of Ervil LeBaron's brothers who, when there was a break off from the LeBaron group, Verlin essentially became one of the prophets or the leaders of one of those breakoffs. So I guess it is still another polygamous group, but see, it comes from the LeBaron. So like, I would still kind of consider that a LeBaron polygamous group because it's also the leaders still a LeBaron, but there was a break off. And so that's another reason why he pinpointed him as the target, because Ervil even feels like he's taking his own followers because they are still from the LeBaron group and were the same group or church or religion when Joel LeBaron was the prophet and in charge. So now he's targeting his other brother. How crazy is that? He's looking at his own, probably his last brother from what I can tell, that's still alive. But because he has his own little following, he's like, I'm going to go take that now too. Like, oh my gosh. It doesn't stop.
They're firing on their family members, their relatives. These are people they had known and loved and gone to church with.
My gosh, you guys. So he's plotting and making this plan to take out Verlin, his own brother, that has a little bit of a separate group of people that come from the same group as him. And one of the ways that I guess they decide to try and take him out is they literally send a group of people to go and raid the little town that they're in, setting buildings on fire, throwing bombs inside of the windows, and shooting inside of the houses. And this is their own family members, direct cousins of them. They're all from the same group just up the line that had just gone. The only difference is they follow a different prophet now. And they are so willing to fight them, and they go through and they have this raid, right? Burning down their own cousins' homes, shooting at them, injuring lots of them, and 2 people end up dying in this raid. But the prophet himself, Verlin, the person they were going after, wasn't there because he knew that Ervil was going to try and take him out. So he was in hiding. Do all this, they don't get him, but they end up hurting many people, many of their own cousins, in the crossfire.
None of these murders happened without Ervil's say-so, but he always made sure to be physically well away from him. This is part of his brilliance as a criminal mastermind, really.
Okay, and so it sounds like Ervil, maybe while he was having all that time sitting in prison, he really thought hard on how he wanted to do this and how he was going to make sure he had no ties or connections to it. At least so he thought. And so when that raid happens, he is in a completely different place and has like witnesses and makes sure that it's known that he is nowhere near that raid, so that he can't be blamed for it, even though he's the one plotting and planning the whole thing.
We were living in Denver. We had a revolving door of other sister wives, older siblings tending us.
Interesting. So they mention one of the sister wives of one of the daughters of Ervil that married Dan. He got another sister wife, and she was caught growing pot, which, you know, in a religious group like that, that should be a big deal, a huge no-no, but she essentially gets away with it somehow. So it just kind of goes to show there's not a lot of rule following. There's a lot of exceptions that are made for certain people. And it's interesting that it's just some of the things that happen, some of the rules and regulations and what the actual implications of what happens within the families varies dramatically between each individual family.
According to Rena, Ervil makes 2 women, his wife Rena Shanath and his stepdaughter Ramona Marston, go kill Rulon Allred.
Okay, that's why I was so confused, because I knew that there was prophet from the AUB group that he did go after to kill, but this was separate. He first does the attack on his brother, Verlin LeBaron's group, and then he starts plotting for the AUB group's leader, which is, at the time, Rulon Allred, the leader of the Apostolic United Brethren polygamous group in Utah. And the way he decides to do it is he has a I believe it was one of his wives. He doesn't specify if because it was one of his daughters. So one of his daughters and one of his wives, he has them team up to go meet up with this prophet of the AUB group and to shoot him. They give the gun to the daughter to do it. And she expresses that she was terrified, but she was more afraid of what they would do to her if she did not listen to Earl, the prophet. And so she does it. They go and they murder Rulin Allred, the leader of the AUB group. And of course, that's how they decide to end the episode. So, man, okay, we're going to get into the next one. There's 4 more of these, a total of 5 episodes of the Daughters of a Cult series, talking about the LeBaron group. And we're going to dive deep into each and every one of them. So if you enjoyed this one, definitely check out the next ones that are coming out here shortly. So thanks for watching, you guys. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.